Hello everybody and welcome back to another Oscar prediction video where today I will be taking a look at the category of Best Documentary Feature. So, this category is interesting as it always tends to be every year. Usually the movie that is perceived as the critics' frontrunner does not end up getting nominated. And we've actually been able to track this trend pretty recently. We knew that Superman, a Christopher Reeve story, was not going to get nominated despite it doing very, very well at Critics' Awards because it's just not the type of thing they go for. They don't go for the feel-good celebrity biodoc that the critics always love. But Will and Harper was one that I was really, really hopeful could maybe get in because it's so much more than just a celebrity doc. It is a trans story that actually does the things that Amelia Perez was getting praised for doing, in that it's actually respectful and it's the sort of thing that's very easily accessible to a lot of people. I really think that if Will and Harper were not a documentary, if it were a narrative film, it probably would be winning Best Picture, honestly. But unfortunately, it's not the sort of thing that the documentary branch went for. I really wish it could have been recognized in song. But looking at the movies that are nominated, surprisingly, there are no Netflix movies here. Not only is Will and Harper gone, but Remarkable Life of Evelyn was gone, which I was really, really hoping would be there. And also, what was the other one? Daughters, that a lot of people thought for sure was going to get in. So it was kind of shocking to see Netflix miss, especially since those were the documentaries that I had watched in the lead up to the nominations. So when the nominations were first announced, I hadn't watched any of them. I have since seen 3 of them. And to be perfectly honest, I'm not the biggest fan of any of them. They're all well-made films, but they're just not the sort of thing that they weren't my cup of tea. And actually, I'm realizing more and more that with documentaries, it's a lot of eye of the beholder. Documentaries are a lot more subjective than narrative films because with narrative films, you can at least point to the crafts and the filmmaking elements and the performances as stuff to admire or not admire. And with documentaries, it's really, does the subject matter interest you or not, even though there are a lot of well-made attributes that go into it as well. With all of that said, if you look at the precursors, the actual winner does seem to be pretty set in stone for this one. So let's not waste any more time. 5th most likely to win is Porcelain War. So this is one of the documentaries that I have seen, and this one is filmed in Ukraine from, I believe, a husband and wife duo, and it's sort of split into 2 different stories. One, the wife is talking about making art, making porcelain figures, and how difficult it is to make art during wartime, but also how crucial it is. And the other side of the film is from the husband who is actively in the war, and we see this really harrowing footage of this troop of soldiers getting together to execute these missions, and how a lot of these were ordinary civilians who are trained how to fight. And what's so tricky with this movie is I really think that either side of this movie would have worked very well as a short film, but trying to put both of them together, in my opinion, they clash a little bit too hard. I don't know if they mesh together the way that the filmmakers wanted, and obviously I have insane respect for anyone who could make a film under these conditions, but I just feel if the main thesis of this movie is that it's important to make art in these tough times, and you want to look at the film as a whole as an art piece, it just kind of rubs me the wrong way when the movie contains actual footage of people getting blown up, and we're calling that art. But maybe that's just me, maybe that's my own personal opinion. I understand why there are some people who have voted for it. Now, what's tricky is that the past 2 winners in this category have both been about the Russia and Ukraine conflict. And obviously, this war is still ongoing. So it does make a certain amount of sense that this could get votes. But in my opinion, this movie is just not as strong as 20 Days in Mariupol or Navalny. Both of those were much stronger narratives. And I think you can see that based on the reception that all of these documentaries have gotten. So while I think I perfectly respect this nomination, I don't think it has a very realistic chance of winning. 4th most likely to win is Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat. So this is another one that I've seen, and this one has gotten some pretty strong reviews, although it wasn't necessarily looking like it was going to be nominated from the precursors. And again, I have to be totally honest with myself. I was into this documentary at first because I was impressed by the editing style and the way that music was utilized in it. But as it went on, I was really, really struggling to find the plot. And as it builds and builds, it does eventually get to a really interesting historical event that would be interesting to see a documentary about. But this movie is 2.5 hours long, and it just takes such a long time trying to get to the point. So I, for that reason, really struggled with it. But clearly other people are responding to it, and I don't blame them because there is a compelling story at the heart of all this. I just had issues with the runtime, and based on the way that it's performed at Precursors, I don't think it's in a very good position to win. But maybe that's my own personal bias eking in there. I think it makes sense that a lot of people would support this movie, but it wasn't my thing, and for some reason, I just don't feel like it's going to be Oscar voters' things either, because it is the longest and it does take a while to get going, and yeah, I just can't see it winning. Third most likely to win is Black Box Diaries. So this is one of the two that I haven't seen, and this movie primarily deals with a woman who was a journalist who was sexually assaulted and is now trying to seek justice for what's happened. And from everything I've heard, this is a really, really powerful documentary, really harrowing, and yet really hard to watch, obviously, given the subject matter. And this one has gotten a fair amount of precursors. I did predict it would be nominated, which I can't say for the other two. And I respect the swing from everything I've heard. Maybe I'll try to watch it. It's one of those where I would have to sign up to Paramount Plus in order to watch it, which don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. But yeah, hearing great things. This one's harrowing and not going to be everyone's cup of tea for that reason, but I think it could definitely get some votes. However, again, based on precursors, I don't know if it has the support it would need to actually go the distance and win. Second most likely to win is Sugarcane. So of the three documentaries that I've watched, this is my favorite, although admittedly not by a whole lot. I think it's hard to find a lot of fault in this one. It just wasn't really my thing, and it deals with the issue of a boarding school, actually much like Nickel Boys, that was very, very harsh to its students, and students faced a lot of abuse. And it's told mostly through talking heads and secondhand interviews. We don't get to see a whole lot of what happened because there's not a lot of footage, which does not make it... It's not as engaging as it could have been, but I do think that a lot of the stories that we hear are powerful, and it makes a lot of sense why the people who watch it are really, really moved by it. Again, the fact that this is my favorite of the three I've seen does count for something, but again, I really, really wish that Will and Harper were here. I really, really wish that Remarkable Life of Evelyn were here, and just based on others' reactions, I think that this is number 2 of the nominees, and yet I don't think it's winning. The film that I have number 1 most likely to win is No Other Land. So frustratingly, this is the only Oscar-nominated feature film that I have no access to. Like everything else, I either have a screener for, or it's on a streaming service, and there's some way I can watch it. I may end up watching 34 of 35 Oscar-nominated films, and this could be the one that trips me up. And it's a real shame, because from everything I've heard, this is the movie that deserves to win Best Documentary. And the film is shot in Palestine during the war, and it does showcase basically a bunch of filmmakers all getting together and creating a piece of art while also telling their story. So very similar to what Porcelain War is doing, but based on the reviews, a lot more effective and a lot more impactful. Now, it is tricky to have these two documentaries in the conversation because the war in Gaza was a much bigger headline throughout 2024 than the war in Ukraine, even though the latter war is still going on. Meanwhile, the war in Gaza has technically reached a ceasefire, even though the ramifications of everything that's happened, we're going to continue to feel those effects for a long time. So maybe it's unfair, but again, we're not talking about the actual wars here. We're not talking about which situation the government needs to get involved in. We're just talking about this documentary. And obviously, this war was a very, very big talking point throughout this year, and the film itself, from everyone who's seen it, is very, very impactful. It's also on the shorter side, which helps, and there's just enough of caring about a good cause and caring about filmmaking and caring about making art. All of the reviews are very, very, very strong. I wish I could see this one. Maybe I'll find a way to see it. Maybe it's still playing in theaters somewhere. I would love for this to be the year that I actually watch all of the nominated films. But yeah, just going off of sheer precursors, I do think this is winning. Maybe if something like Will and Harper were here, then maybe voters would want to go elsewhere. But as it stands right now, I don't see No Other Land losing. So, thank you very much for watching this, and tune in next time when I will be taking a look at the category of Best Supporting Actor. See you then.